just have a conversation. You're welcome to say your name and your sort of title, the context of how you're associating, because for future historians, how did you define what's important? Okay, so great. You can say your name and then just say you founded the.
Okay, my name is Jane Freeman, and I'm one of the people behind the founding of the Historical Society here in Sun City. And actually, it came about 2 or 3 years before we were going to celebrate our 25th birthday. And a group were talking, and we thought, there's no place for any one person to go for information about Sun City. We aren't incorporated, we don't have a Chamber of Commerce. And we got to thinking, well, let's write a history for our 25th anniversary. And fools walk in where angels fear to tread, and having made this suggestion, you can imagine where it ended up. But I was fortunate in that Glenn Sandberg came along, and we kind of partnered together and began developing a lot of information, collecting information. We had a lot of people involved. A lot of the residents pitched in and did a lot of the research for us and some of the writing and tracking down information. And it took us about 2.5 years to write what we call Jubilee, the 25-year history of Sun City. And part of it, we collected a lot of information, old photographs people donated. We talked to some people and got the records. And we had 5,000 copies of the Jubilee printed, and we sold every one of them. Now we're collecting them and reselling them again as collector's items, and it was very popular. But I think one thing, the important thing, when we were able to get the first model home, we could headquarter all of the material and get it separated. We have a lot of graduate students coming in now studying Sun City and the aging population and how it came about, and people who are just interested in history and history. We also are completing, it sounds morbid, an obituary file, and it's amazing the number of people come in looking for families and records of that type of thing. We have all of the telephone directories, and that is unique in that it also lists the name of the person, where they're from, and their occupation, which I don't think you find in the usual telephone directories. But it's become a depository. And another interesting thing is even the Del Webb Corporation comes to us quite often looking for material that they haven't been able to locate. So I think it's something that we're preserving for history, and the older it gets, the more interesting it will become for the people. Mm-hmm.
When did you yourself actually move to Sun City?
I moved in 1970, so I've been here for 31 years now and seen a lot of change and a lot of growth.
You overlapped with many people who started the original pioneers.
Yes, yes.
What did they tell you about the good old days?
It was small. Everybody knew everybody, a lot of camaraderie, a lot of socialization. And of course, as it grew, that became a little further apart. But I still think we have a sense of camaraderie here in Sun City. We work together. If there is a social need or a medical need, we find it, and we see that it's offered. And I think Sun City now is very fortunate in that we have phenomenal medical facilities. And I think that contributes also to our well-being and our long life.
Why did you personally move here?
I think it was primarily to get out of the snow and the cold in the east. And my husband was interested in golf and the year-round weather. Mm-hmm.
In 1960 and 70, did you have other options for this type of housing, or was it only Del Webb and Sun City?
Well, we looked in Florida, we looked in Colorado and other places, but this just appealed to us.
Why, and under what factors?
The weather, primarily. That was our primary reason for coming here. And the people we had met were friendly. And I think at that time, everybody was moving in all at the same time, pretty much so. And now people are settled, and newcomers coming in are coming into an established community. And sometimes that makes it a little more difficult to get integrated into the community.
When you were moving in 1970 and from then on now, what have you contributed to, or your generation has contributed to build up this Sun City lifestyle? Clubs?
Well, the clubs and the organizations, but I think one of the strong points was the volunteering on the part of the residents. In fact, we're known as a city of volunteers. And people aren't volunteering like they used to, but we still get volunteers. We find if you ask them, they're willing to help, rather than offering, I want to volunteer work, and I go. But you can find people, and it's continuing. And I think that makes for a community, and as people have said, if you keep busy, that's the long life. Out here, 50th wedding anniversary is nothing. that this is commonplace out here. But we get 60. I know a couple is getting ready to celebrate their 74th wedding anniversary. So longevity is really a lifestyle out here. And they're active. Where I'm living, there's a gentleman, 98 years old. He plays golf 3 days a week. He doesn't play 18 holes, but, but he's still playing golf. Mm-hmm.
What did you want this historical society to do when you started it?
I think to preserve and for history. And so it will be available. And I say it's going to be more important in generations to come than it is right now. Right now, we're living it. But also, at the same time, if we don't collect it now, we won't have it for future use. And I think this is our main mission, is collecting, sorting, cataloging, and making it available, and working with people who come in and want to use it.
If you were to sit with your grandchildren and great-grandchildren with whatever it is that you've collected, what is the story? Once upon a time, there was a town called Sun City, and?
And it was the best decision I ever made when we moved here. Because it opened up a whole new lifestyle. My husband and I had been working. The children were grown and out of college. But we came out and we had a second life, really. It was a second lifestyle, a new way of living, an enjoyable way of living. If we didn't want to do it, we didn't do it. If we wanted to do it, we did it. And yet we were interested in the fellow man and our neighbors and their welfare. Mm-hmm. It opened up a whole new outlook.
When people come and do research, either as graduate students or people who come through from the media or from international, what do they want to know about the history? What do people ask you? Or what do you find yourself going through? Pictures to give to them to understand? Or
I think the main interest is what made it click. Because every sociologist in the country when it started said it'll never work. But what made it click? And I think it was the homogeneity of the people, their interests. And when people came in 60, these were people who were coming out. They didn't have retirement funds then. They didn't have pension funds. And some of the people were living on Social Security. And in fact, some of our people right now to this day are living in Social Security. About 10% of our residents are living at or below the poverty level, in spite of the fact that Sun City is considered a wealthy community. So we have the other spectrum too. But I think there was a togetherness that you didn't find in the other communities. And I think that's what held it together.
what did having this...
Change too.
Okay, you're saying, I had never thought about that, yeah. When the how you would present the materials.
Well, we do have rotating exhibits, but this year being our 40th anniversary, and this was really Phyllis Streets, who was the president of the Historical Society, her idea, and really 90% of it is her work, actually. And we did it in segments. We have the 1960s with pictures and some of the events that went on, the 1970s, the 80s, and the 90s, right up to the present time. So you can go through the house as we have the displays, and you can see the evolution and some of the changes from the very small, modest homes to our larger homes, and how as people moving in were more affluent, demanded more, and this is reflected in the recreation centers. It's reflected in the churches, the size of the churches. We have beautiful churches out here, and the sizes of the homes, and the prices changed. And you can see this evolution.
When you go back to the very time that you and your husband started shopping for this, did you go through this house and talk about how you...
No, this house was a private home at that time, but we went through the current models.
Talk about this house and the fact that it came on the market and we put the Historical Society here.
Well, it had been a private residence for several years, and then I think 2 different families had lived in here, if I remember correctly, and it came on the market, and we had been looking for something. We were, in fact, another model home had come on the market further down, the 5th one, but was out of our price range. This came in, and it was available, and we were able to get some funding, some private contributions and grants came in, and we were able to buy it. We had to do a lot of work with it, but we have been able to manage it, and we still exist on contributions and gifts. So I think it's unique that we have the very first model home. It's very modest. It's getting much too small for our needs, but so far we're coping.
Thank you. I think this is the perfect segue to speak to Ms. Street. That's a very nice overview. Thank you so much.
Connie is going to
Remind me again when you first moved here, and how you chose to come to Sun City West and how that differs in perspective with the regular Sun City, and then we'll go into the Historical Society. Okay. So why don't you just say your name?
My name is Phyllis Street, and my husband and I moved here in 1984 to Sun City West. And we had friends that had moved here previously, and my husband was very often out here for some hearings that he had had. So he said, that's really a nice place to live. And so we came out in July of one year to see how really hot it was in July. But we had both been raised in Kansas, so it didn't seem too hot to us. And so we did decide that we would pick out a lot, and we picked out the 36th lot that was picked out in Sun City West, but we didn't move out here until '84. But when the house was finished, we just had a realtor handle it, and it was rented until we were ready to move in, and it still looked like a new house when we moved in.
I don't really know about Sun City. Tell me what the difference is between the West and the original concept. Sun City West.
Well, Sun City West, they broke ground in 1978 for it, and they did start people moving in December. And the amenities were not in yet. That was the difference between Sun City West and Sun City. In Sun City, it was all already here, even the shopping center. But Hillcrest Golf Course was the only one that was really in. And so it took several months before they really had the amenities that they wanted. And if you want a little interesting story, Del Webb Corporation did subsidize the rec centers here in Sun City with about a $35,000 grant so that the people in Sun City West that started moving in could use their facilities. But it didn't turn out to work very well because the people in Sun City said, no, we don't want all those people in Sun City West coming over. Well, there really were not very many people in Sun City West at the time, but it didn't work out very well. So they arranged a lot of entertainment for them, and the Del Webb Corporation would take them to the Suns games, and they would plan little trips and just really saw all kinds of things around in Arizona. So they kept it pleasant until the Johnson Rec Center was finished, and then they were on their own.
Please tell me about your connection with the Sun City's Historical Society.
Well, my first interest in it was the time when my husband had been asked to be on the board, and they were having an open house for the Sun City Saints, who had been a young woman's baseball team out here, softball, I guess that's what they called it. Anyway, they were a very popular group, but they had disbanded. They were no longer playing out here, but we decided to have a reunion of the ones that were still here. And so they had a big open house for them here, and my husband said, the women are going to need some help in fixing the hot dogs and the popcorn, so why don't you come over and help them? And I said, well, sure, I will. And one thing led to another, and then I agreed to be a hostess, and I was a hostess for several years. And then when my husband died, they asked me to be on the board. And so I have been on the board for the last 8 years. About 7 years, board of trustees.
Okay, and then you became president?
Yeah, I did serve as president for the last 4 years, and now I'm free of that job, but I still have the membership rolls on my computer, and they depend on me to keep that going.
What was your vision of what you wanted to accomplish as president?
Well, we really were working hard to preserve the history, and it's a day-to-day thing. We have different people clipping things from the local newspapers, anything that we feel is really of historical interest and will be 50 years, 100 years from now, and they clip them, and we copy that on acid-free paper, and it goes into our files, listed according to subject matter, and we try to keep up. It's really a big job, and we even clip the obituaries out of the News Sun every day, and now they're running nearly 200 a month. It gets big around in the winter months. It may slack off a bit in the summer but it is a daily job.
Now, you've been doing a lot to celebrate the 40th anniversary of Sun City. Tell us what you did for the anniversary, please.
Well, we wanted to really be a part of that celebration, and the whole board worked on this. It wasn't all my idea, but we did decide to divide it into the decades, and we just tried to pick out the things that were important. And you have to start on one side here, and you go around, and then the other 2 decades are in the other room. But we tried to pick out the things that were of most interest to people, and we thought we would not have this up all year, but everybody that came, oh, I haven't seen it before, and it's appealed to them, and so we have left it up the whole year. Now we wonder what we're going to put up next.
Is there a theme for each of the decades? The 60s would have been the start.
Yes, it begins the opening day, and then the second group of the rec centers, and then we brought in the hospital when it was built, as they needed that, and then all the entertainment. And the other side over here are just examples of the kind of activities the volunteers participate in, all the clubs and the leisure activities. And the visionaries are on the other side, the front here.
Yes.
The men that had the most.
You've been an AARP member through the years. How does the Sun City history and AARP's history intersect? We do have the 4th AARP chapter here. Also a lot of volunteer activities. Do you want to talk about the connection of AARP in a way?
Actually, I've not had a great deal of relation with them, except I've kept up my membership in it.
Yes.
And I'm aware of what is going on. I get their literature all the time, their magazine.
Have you seen things from chapter 4, number 4? People have come up to you with information about that chapter at all for the history?
No, I haven't had any contact on that.
What about the volunteer activities through the years at the Sun City? What types of things have you all done?
In Sun City West, what have I done?
All of the volunteers here.
Oh, well, they do all kinds of things. You know, the prides are one of the first things that got organized because people wanted to be sure that the community really looked good. And they organized a group that every Saturday morning gets out and cleans up anything that needs cleaning up along the main boulevard there, the ones that are not kept up by the county. And you see them out every Saturday morning. And then they do have a good time after they finish their work. They go have breakfast somewhere. I've never done that myself, but apparently they enjoy it very much.
What do you think the Sun City residents have contributed to America? You know, the image of aging, the concept of aging, a new way of aging. Anything that you'd like to say about that?
Well, certainly the Del Webb Corporation made it seem like retirement can be a really active part of your life. And that's true. I mean, when we moved out here, there were different things. If you get bored out here, it's your own fault because there's so many opportunities and things that you can do in real volunteer community services, as well as your own hobbies, too, because the craft shops are just full of all kinds of beautiful things that people make. I've never gotten around to that. But I've done other things I've been involved in.
Oh, yes, you've contributed so much to this history. Why have you worked so hard on getting this historical record down? Why is it significant?
Well, I think it is important to the community in the years ahead, and I just kind of got involved in it, and it's hard to let go, so I'm hanging in there.
What keeps you going? You keep discovering new things, or?
Yes, the history is really interesting. I mean, more things you find, and it's kind of interesting, too. You read the different magazines, different reports, and sometimes you don't get the same story. So then you kind of wonder now, was I right to begin with what I tell, or am I telling the wrong story?
Any funny anecdotes?
Jane Freeman always said that history is part fact and part fiction. I quote her on that.
Do you have a funny story about people coming with boxes of, photographs, or people getting ready to throw something away and you're going into a dumpster?
Yes, and we have been getting that because we are starting this history of Sun City West. And we have alerted people, and they've called us, you know, and I've gone and picked up boxes. In fact, I have a box out in my car now that are directories of different clubs and lots of the newsletters that fortunately people saved. And we don't have as many in the 90s, though, as we do for the 70s and 80s. People kept them for a long time. They were a nice size that they could easily put in a box, you know, but then they changed their format and made bigger newspaper-sized things, and I think people quit saving them.
Great.
I hope we can get some, though.
That's wonderful. Thank you so
Okay.
much. That's what those are then on the table over there, right?
Yes,
Oh,
yes,
wow.
they are.
They're very impressive. Very well done. Because in those days.
My name's Connie McMillan, and I am the current president of the Sun Cities Area Historical Society, having been on the board for quite a few years in various officer capacities.
How did you first come to the Sun Cities?
My parents moved here in 1970, although they did not, I believe, know Mrs. Freeman. And I started coming out to visit, and then more and more frequently. And in the late 80s and 90s, I was out here almost every other month for a week or two, doing my own personal business back and forth cross country. And I feel for many, many years involved in the retirement lifestyle out here, even though I wasn't actually retired.
But then you made your own decision to come.
I made a choice a long time ago that I would probably spend my later years here. And as my mother's health failed, my father having passed away prior to her, and I made a choice to come out and live with my mother and her sister, who's still alive at the age of 99.
Given your own background in urban planning and your ability to understand this phenomenon, what did you see the Sun Cities make available for your parents' generation?
Well, it's difficult for me to totally put myself in their feet, but definitely the climate, the camaraderie of people of similar age who could still be very active, keep up with hobbies, social interaction. The people here come from all over the country and all over the world, so their conversations and dialogues were very active, and many, as they do now, are constantly traveling and on the go. And then, of course, golf, social clubs, and cultural facilities. So that was a big part of my parents' life.
Why is it pertinent to your life now?
Well, I'm in a lot of ways a city kid and have grown up in major cities. But in seeing the realities as you get older, the lifestyle out here where the distances are not as great, you're near a major metropolitan area, you have not only the long-established amenities in the city, but you have them right here, so to speak, in your own backyard, good health facilities, easy access, and for someone like me who has a handicap not as perceptible with eyesight, the advantages here, moving here at the age I did, and long range just seemed too obvious.
How did you first get connected with the Historical Society?
Well, in a way, I guess I'm an oddity. For them, I always had a lifetime interest in history and architecture and buildings. And on a trip visiting my folks, I wandered down, got a flyer. On the plane back home, thought for the membership price, I'll send them a check. And I was their only out-of-town member, so that when they do a bulk mailing, the membership chair stopped and put a first-class stamp on it. And I amazed them by showing up at various events when I then happened to be on subsequent trips to my family. And I think once I moved here full-time, they readily wanted me on the board.
What have they accomplished as a historical society up to this point?
Well, it's actually quite amazing, because when you think of a community that's just over 40 years old, and you start on the ground floor, and people like Mrs. Freeman had the vision to start keeping records, and Mrs. Street and her peer group to continue that process. Most places struggle, whether it's our own cities and communities, whether it's countries overseas, to find the records, to document it after people have passed away. And the fact that you're on the ground floor, not even one lifetime now, and then to find a unique home, the first model home, to maintain those records and allow the public through is just quite wonderful. We all travel, we all visit cultural sites, we wander through public facilities, and yet those groups struggle to find their factual history as opposed to the unprovable anecdotal or misinformations of time. So the ongoing exciting fact of it and what we can live to people after us is just amazing to me.
What are your goals as president for the next stage of this historical society?
Well, the organization is in a transition because people who have moved here come from elsewhere and don't necessarily bring their families up here. I am a second generation, so that makes me a little different. They think of their history back where they grew up or where their children reside. So, in a way, history is not as well known as it is. The society has challenges for membership growth and outreach, for more support of the business community. And after its 15-year history, well-founded, well-organized, it needs to review where they go with an aging site, record keeping that needs to keep up with modern technology. I think the people speaking before me mentioned the Del Webb Corporation and the local newspaper, the West Valley, come to us looking for their information, and we are the only source. Records were destroyed, the newspapers' archives were thrown out or passed on, or we're the source for it. And how we meet those needs and how we get younger incoming seniors to have some appreciation is our challenge, to get our word out there beyond our current rather modest size membership.
Talk to me about how AARP as an organization entered your parents' life or your life. Anything on your radar screens that intersects with the organization that I represent?
Well, that's a tough one. As long as I've known, my parents were members of AARP, but I don't know exactly when. My 99-year-old aunt, obviously, both she and my mother, and probably my father, back when the first opportunities for long-term health care took them out. Younger members have not taken advantage of those things. It's paid off years later in their health care service needs at assisted living places and in the latter years of my mother's life and still in my aunt's life. I believe I received a first solicitation when I was around 55, and quite frankly, it was such a modest fee, sign up for 3 years, who could pass up $8? And I was living in Boston at the time, so in my way, now tell me more about the organization on the local scene. So I did get some literature, and I did go to a few meetings and pay $1 or $2 to stay on the local roster, but was not too active. I'm still at an age that's under the Medicare 65, so where the health benefits and other services of AARP will kick in for me are yet to totally be realized. Virtually, however, everybody that I know out here, is involved at Medicare and periphery AARP benefits if they've kept it up. I find that sometimes I scan the magazines and the newsletters, other times I pay little attention. The new MM version actually got me going through the whole thing. But I think some of that was eyesight related, quite frankly, too, readability.
What would you want AARP to be for you and your generation of aging Americans?
Oh, that's a very, very tough call. I don't think they're known in the actual retirement areas such as the Sun Cities are, except for the health-related benefits or supplemental benefits. The little I know of the local chapter, you know, in field trips or other things, it's just a well-kept secret. So how they reach out is their challenge.
After you finish as historical society president, what will you have wanted to accomplish for your stint of tenure?
Well, there again, those who are still around, because they're active and older than me, it's a constant transition. We need to network the, as I said, expanding membership and the business support, such as many other community groups have, and somehow or other find others that will wish to come in and keep up the records, and do it in some more electronic ways than perhaps our current members, like Mrs. Freeman and Mrs. Street, do at home computer systems. We also need to start getting at a level of historic preservation identity, perhaps national registration. That may lead to grants and other type of graduate student work. We've had some of that in small segments over the years, but as a small group in a somewhat smaller building, it's hard to get the people that will regularly staff and volunteer staff.
Just one last question about the connection with Del Webb and the 40th anniversary. Was there some sort of ceremony? And did Del Webb people come out, or what was the marking of that?
Well, the Sun City, for the entire 12 months, had a 40th anniversary committee with celebrations throughout the year, often focused on the quarter point, the January, April, July, September, and year end. We themed around the exhibits that Mrs. Street discussed and our own history of 15 years. During the key week in January, that was also a significant anniversary to us, we had 4 days of open houses with different themes. And there were Del representatives here and Mr. Boswell's relatives who were involved in a lot of the original work. Obviously, Mrs. Freeman could speak to a lot more of that type of thing, but we still have the offshoots of people coming down because of the connection.
1960 Sun City West, 1978.
78.
1978, and then Sun City Grand.
1999, 98.
So the two
Sun City is 41 at the time we talk. Sun City West is 23, and Sun City Grand is in its second year, I believe, starting its third year.
So the 25th anniversary of Sun City West will be 2003?
Correct, and the people under the leadership of Mrs. Street and a couple of our other board members who reside in Sun City West are starting to work on a history for that 25th year. And then even long range, I don't know that I will be that involved, to look for a 50th anniversary publication related to the Sun Cities and tying in all the histories, perhaps, but...
2010.
Exactly.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Okay, I think I can see. Okay, no, that was beautiful.